Here we go. Hi, everybody. Chuck Hyde, Vista's Chair here in Northwest Arkansas, and I'm pleased today to be joined by Dusty Pruitt. Dusty and I have been colleagues. 15 years ago, we worked together at Northwest Leadership. Dusty, you've been a Vistage member during your time as CEO. We've referred companies and people back and forth where it's made sense. But I think for the context, and we've had a number of these interviews now, you're another example of a local subject matter expert that I want to bring in to these conversations we're having. So welcome. Thanks for making time today.
Glad to be here. It's been 15 years, believe it or not, Chuck, that we've known each other and worked together. So always happy to work with you on anything. So excited for today.
You bet, man. Well, for those of you all that don't know Dusty, he started his career in CPG, working with Nestle, and then had since led 2 different companies as CEO. Today, he runs his own consulting business, primarily focused around being an EOS implementer. And so he presented EOS and the concepts and the structure to our Vistage members. I want to say it's a little over a year ago, Dusty.
Yeah, last summer.
Yeah, and so really appreciate the opportunity to have you re-engage with our membership here today. So I always like to do this first, and you and I talk regularly, but for context, I think it's still important. How are you doing, and how has everything that's been going on in the world, how have you been impacted by that, and kind of what's your world like right now?
Yeah, well, it's better now than it was. So yeah. It's improved dramatically from the spring. What's been really great, and on the personal front, I'll start there. I've been able to mountain bike a lot. I've had a lot of time for fishing. So all of the things, I think Abraham Lincoln said, if you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So I really tried to approach the last 6-8 weeks as, okay, how am I going to sharpen the axe here so that I can be really helpful and, profoundly helpful with people, and particularly my clients coming out of all of this. And so I think I've done pretty well at that. It's been hard I'm not a sit at home kind of guy. So even like looking at you, Chuck, over the screen is sort of killing part of me on the inside. I'm supposed to be around people, and I'm wired that way. So that's been the worst part, is just doing everything remotely. But anyway, that's on the personal side. Professionally, it's been really validating to me to see, the group of clients, 15, 17 clients that I've been working with, and how they've been able to absorb what's been going on. This is a huge issue, but at the end of it, it's an issue, and we have to figure out how, as leaders of organizations, we're going to navigate uncertain times, navigate into uncharted territory. And so it's been really validating to see the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years with these clients really start to take hold. And the things that we're grasping onto are sort of anchors of our business. They're disciplines that are helping us move forward. And so, I mean, that's been the most. It's been fun. Like, more than anything, it's just been fun to see. And that's, I get helping people. That's what I'm like, why God put me on this earth. And so, getting to do that with something that actually is working, I couldn't be better.
That's good. Well, and that's a great segue and lead into what I want to focus our conversation on today. We were talking off camera about, I want to share a screen here. Vistage, as you know, Dusty has a great research department, and they have put together let me see if I can get the right thing here. Technology will cooperate. This Corona curve. Now, I've been very impressed by this because, if you look at just time on the x-axis and business activity, I think it's a good label on the Y. You've got this trigger event, and for a while we were in denial there, and you're like, well, that's somewhere else. It's not really happening here. And then all of a sudden, bam, we've had a tipping point. And we, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, were in this search for the bottom time of this realization, and how are we going to survive? And then as time has passed, it's been, I like the pause terminology there in the trough, and it says, okay, can we begin to see some signs of life, of reboot, rebuild, recover to this different place? And I think it's a pretty good characterization in what I've seen. I think it's mirrored a lot of what our Vistage members have been experiencing. I will say that on a macro level, we're beginning to see signs of life in the economy. but in our vintage groups, I know we're seeing signs of reboot, rebuild, recover. And so I think this is an interesting graph. And then there's another view of it here where, if I can get it to advance, there was we have just for technology, but there's this strategy, and I'll go searching for that in a minute. But while you talk here, Dusty, react to this. You mentioned 15 to 17 clients. What's your reaction to this, and how does it match what we're seeing and what you're seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, so anecdotally, from what I'm seeing, yes, absolutely. And I think as a nation and just industries in general, this is very accurate. Now, the nuances are how steep is the market crash, the tipping point, how steep is that? And then I think the other question is, how long is the pause? And then the probably $1 million question is there a rebound or a recovery for every business? And unfortunately, the answer is going to be no, depending on industry, depending on, just a number of things. What I was telling Chuck before we started was I'm just so interested in the Corona curve, this model, because I think it's really helpful for like a framework for us to see this in. That's what I'm interested in. What I'm fascinated with is everything before, like to the left of this chart. And I think that's a really helpful way for us to predict if there is a recovery and what right of the chart looks like. So it'll be, that's what hopefully we get into some of that today. But when I think about just me personally, that tipping point, like the red kind of marker or whatever that is there. I mean, for me, the coronavirus, the pandemic was this thing in Asia, and it was like, what's going on? And then they canceled an NBA game. And it seems like everything, so what's fascinating is it's not always anything even related to our business that tips it off, but it's out there. It's something socially or whatever. And then it just starts to, and it just spirals quickly. And so, for me, that red dot was they canceled an NBA game, and then the world changed. And so
I think you hit it, and we talked off camera. Is that for me, and I was talking about this before I saw the curve, is that the things people were doing or maybe haven't done yet, whatever was going on prior to the left of this line, is determined where you entered, how vertical you entered on the graph, and the slope of the line afterwards. Like that was a predictor 100% in terms of what we had seen. And I think it's going to be a predictor going forward as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so to your original question, yes, this is very consistent with what we're seeing. But here with the colorful boxes, walk us through that, because I think this is really helpful.
I think, and so what we were seeing early, and we're hearing so much about that orange box and in that negative slope, is crisis strategies. If we think of what's the strategy approach at any given point on this curve, it's like, oh my goodness, what's happening? Can we survive? And then in this trough, everybody, once things like PPP came in place, the EIDL loans, I mean, all the assistance and things that were happening helped people, breathe and get their bearings a little bit. And then they've been in a pivot strategy. I think, Dusty, you hit on a really important point, is how long is that going to last? Like, how long can you go to really figure out what is our pivot strategy? But when you begin to think, and now, okay, we have something, and now how are we going to prepare for that growth, and understanding how our strategy will work. And then I love this idea of grand reopen. But these questions at the bottom of a new normal, what's the slope of that line? You already talked about that on recovery. Are we selling different things? Are we selling to different customers, different markets? What's competition done in this time? Have they been weakened? Have they gotten stronger? Do they get stronger faster than we did? And how have our customer needs changed? And so I like this view of this curve as well, because it talks about the mindset of the company during each cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is about that mindset in each of those. I think you're exactly right. One of the things, particularly in the pivot strategy, that I've been spending quite a bit of time on is, there are organizations that, like I said earlier, they don't get to have the benefit of a reboot or a recovery. And it's just, from a cash position, if you've, the PPP loans, the SBA help that you talked about, those have been great to sort of stave off a
Right.
lot of the struggles in the business. But if we're going to try to go grow an organization again, one of the most expensive things for an organization is growth. I mean, it just consumes cash. And so business owners and leaders are going to have to find cash if they don't have it in reserves. Like if there's not a war chest for this, it's going to be, line of credit. It's going to be new investor. I mean, there's that pivot strategy isn't just a product play. It's a fundamental business model play. And owners and leaders are going to have to decide their sort of level of tolerance to get back into the game in a meaningful way. And I mean, this is economics at its core in terms of how fast competition is going to move and how you differentiate, but also how the business model is going to drive itself into hopefully what we all get to that far right, which is the new normal. But there is not one way to get there. There's a number of ways, and it's going to be creativity from the leadership team to figure that out.
Well, and I like what you said there in this pivot strategy, and not just about your offering, right? This is a way of doing business strategy. And I know that's where you focus a lot in your work with EOS. And I'm on record that to me, the beauty of EOS is really how it integrates so many business fundamentals, not only to show the clear relationships, but to actually create clear interrelationships. Right. And so for what I'm seeing, the fundamentals that are enabling companies to begin to make progress along this curve are those things. And so is there anything in particular that you're seeing companies get clarity on right now that are being difference makers?
Yeah, good. That's a really good question. And I mean, there's a few that I'll call out. I think, the first one is just what I've been calling the plan. and it's just the idea that and this is a good rule of thumb for anybody, but if you're in or running or leading a business over any course of time, so let's just say 10 years, you should go ahead and plan on 2 really great banner years. Like we could do nothing wrong, 2 real awesome, phenomenal years. You should plan on 2 terrible years where it just nothing we tried went right. That was awful. And then there's about 6 kind of average years. And someone told me, I'm a Kansas City Royals fan. Chuck is a Cardinals fan, so we have our Missouri battle lines here. But
I still haven't got 1985, but that's okay. Thanks.
That's right. Yeah, that's fine. I think that in 2015, though, the most recent world champions were the Royals. Anyway, that said, baseball is in a normal season. It's 160 games, and you're going to win 50 of them. You're going to lose 50 of them just showing up. So it's what you do in those other games that really matters for your season. And I think that's true of business. It's what you do in those 6 kind of average years, because, we could look at the Corona curve here and that's a huge deal. But, if we still have clarity on where we're going 10 years from now, kind of that long-term, that this is just one of those 2 bad years. And, it shouldn't, hopefully, and it will impact things more. I'm not trying to sound like a reductionist here. I'm not saying that this is just, run of the mill issues. It's not. Right. But, if we have clarity on where we're going, the hill just got steeper, but the goal is still there. And so being able to back up and have a vision for, look, and say this to your team, look, this is hard and this is going to require fundamental shifts. But if we are still clear on where we're going and how we plan to get there, this is just an obstacle in our way. And we did not see this coming, but that doesn't give us the excuse not to go where this organization's built to go. And so that would be the first thing that I've seen, just that resolve to say, this is an issue, we're going to work through this, but guys, we're still going this way. So that's the first thing. The second one is just that I've seen organizations do well through this that are grounded, is be able to really have the discipline to know what's important. And for some organizations, it's okay. It's not how do we, in EOS, we teach rocks, most important things in the next 90 days, always living our lives in this 90-day world. But in a time like this, it may not be, we can't even see that far into the future. Right. So it may be, what does it look like to win the week? Or even what does it look like to win the day? But it's the discipline and the ability of the leaders to say, this is important, this is not, and actually work on what's important. that's what gives at least that sense of direction, that sense of purpose. And it, it feels like little wins, but little things add up to big things. And
Well,
so helping.
reminds me, Dusty, of simplifying the complex, right? Because
Yes.
there's a ton of things happening, but I really like because I've always been impressed. One of my favorite things about the EOS model is this 90-day rocks, and we could think in 90-day terms.
That's right.
I think, and maybe we'll get to a place where we can again, but right now it may be a little long, right? I was a conversation with my wife the other day just about, some things at home and our house and our plans, and said, and over the next 30 days, this is what we know.
That's right.
and that's and so I'm not going to think too much after that. And so we're going to do what we can, but I think it could be the week, right? So if in getting people to think and function is like, okay, here's the one or two most essential things for us in this period, and whether that's a week or whether that's a month or whatever, that sounds like a huge deal.
Yeah, you got it. And the other thing, the other thing I said there was the discipline to, prioritize, or the discipline to keep the main thing. And what I've seen, and I think, anybody watching this or anyone you talk to, if this is your business, this is your livelihood, this is your thing. Like, if this doesn't work, it's not that you're out of a job. It's all on the line here, right? And that's when you know you own the business, is when you can't sleep because you don't know if it's going to work or not. But it's the discipline to reject the thought that means I need to do more doing in the business. Like, our natural instinct is, my checklist is just going to get longer, and so I'm just going to do more and more and more. And actually, that turns out to be counterproductive for the business, because if you've been able to hang on to at least some version of your staffing levels, now if you've had to let everyone go and it's just you, that's a different story. But if you've been able to keep some sort of structure through this, the worst thing you can do is let yourself fall down into the weeds and just be doing all the time. You have to find ways to carve out time to work on the business, not just in it. And I think that's discipline, because oftentimes that's where you get into trouble, is at some point we think we outwork our capacity, and it'll only ever go as far as we can take it. And that's not making 1 + 1 = 3. That's making 1 + 1 = 2, or worse, 1 + 1 = 1.5.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, a little plug here. I started Patrick Lencioni's latest book called The Motive.
That's right.
And in that, he talks about one of these fundamental truths is like, and it certainly is speaking to the CEO, owner, executive role, but it really, in my experience, Dusty, it's at every level. If you're doing a job somebody else can do, if you're not doing the things that only you can do, then you're actually being counterproductive. You're hurting the company, because now there's things that only you can do that need to be done, and you're not getting them done because you're off distracted by something else.
Yeah, that's right. And to tie it back to exactly, and if anyone hasn't read that book, that's absolutely worth the time. And all of Lencioni's stories, they're fables, or his books are fables, so they're easy reads. But the discipline to do that as the leader, the owner of the organization, helps set the priorities for the rest of the organization. Because if we just all show up every day and we're not working in tandem, any momentum we've built as a team has gone out kind of out the window, because there's no discipline in saying this is important for this week or this month or this quarter. Right. And I think that's the first thing that goes. And then, as goes the leadership team, we say in EOS, so goes the rest of the company. And, the rebound, the right side of that curve, again, it may not be as fast out of the crisis mode, or it may never get out of there if we don't know what's most important.
Right. Well, and me, I'm an engineer by background. So I'm a process guy. So that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to EOS and its structure. But EOS wasn't invented for this, right? It was existed long before, and it will exist long after. And we were talking that, you could take that Corona curve off and replace it with any given title, right? That there's any kind of stimulus that creates some form of chaos or disruption in your business. And then these are the cycles. This is a potential cycle. And then the only real question is slope of the line and duration, right?
Yeah.
And companies that are disciplined and have a way of working are much more suited to handle those things, those disruptions, those disruptive events, those crises, than others. And so based on your experience, Dusty, and the kinds of things that you see, speak to our Vistage members and whoever else may be watching, like, what are the 1 or 2 disciplines that you're saying, okay, right now, make sure you've got these things in place, and then kind of begin to build from there. What's your advice to
Oh
those?
man. So the two, this is what I've been preaching to my clients, and these would be the two that I would tell anybody, and I'll use the EOS terms. They'll make sense if you've using other operating systems or you've read other books or whatever. But the first one I've already talked about, which is rocks, and rocks is just that idea of what truly is most important. And everyone knows the analogy comes from Stephen Covey, where your time is a glass jar, and if you got to put big rocks in first, and then you put the small rocks, and then the pebbles, and then the sand or the water, and you can fit it all into the jar. But most often what we try to do, because we're creatures of habit and we like checklists, because it shows, we put stakes in the ground and we like to show progress. We put water in first, like I got to go to the dentist, or I got to pick milk up on the way home. And then we put the sand or the pebbles, and those are the emails that I got to get out, or the phone calls I got to make. And then we've got the small rocks, and we're putting those in next. And those are the meetings we've got to have, and the performance reviews, and the stuff that's, it's important. But what happens is we fill our time with that, and then we don't have time for the big, really big stuff that's actually going to move it forward. And again, until we've built the discipline to be able to say, all of these things need to get done, but these are the most important. This stuff over here, it'll fit in, but get this done first. What's most important? And so the groups, the businesses and organizations that are able to do that clearly, and again, hopefully in 90 days, but if it has to be monthly or weekly, just setting that clarity, that gives so much focus to the team on or department. That's what I've got to go get done. So that's the first one. Okay. The second one that I think is so important, and I preach this all the time, and I say, I've probably said this a million times, but the greatness of an organization is not defined by how few issues you have. Every organization has issues. So greatness and issues do not correlate. They do not correlate. The best organizations, guess what? Have a lot of issues. The bankrupt, broken down businesses, guess what? They have issues. So your greatness is not how few issues you have. It's how well you can line them up, knock them down, and make them go away forever. That's what makes you great. And so building a culture in your organization where it's okay to say, Chuck, I have an issue. I need help solving this, right? So that's the first step, is there's got to be a culture where someone can raise their hand and say, I don't know how to do it. I'm not sure what to do. They're not going to get judged. Let their performance not be indicated on how many issues they bring to the table, but how well they respond and, build action plans to close against those issues. But, that's what we're looking for, not people that just don't bring issues to the table. Because then oftentimes, how many CEOs have told you, I would just love to know what's going on around here, right? And it's because we're just all in preservation mode, especially when we're in a pandemic, right? It's, gosh, all these people are losing their job. I can't be that person. Who are they cutting first? The person that doesn't have it figured out. I'm not raising my hand. And so we have to, as leaders of the business, help foster a culture where it's okay to bring issues to the table. Because remember, our greatness is not lack of issues. And then the second thing is, when those issues are there, how do we deal with them so that we can knock them down and make them go away forever? Identify what they are at the root cause. You know what? This is actually indicative of the fact that we don't have a plan, or we don't have a process for that, or this is a person thing. This isn't or we just don't have visibility to the data. So we don't know the answer. But being able to count because what we're experiencing are symptoms, we got to understand what the root is. And then we got to go to work solving those things. And then obviously the accountability to act on whatever the solve is. And then we're done. We've moved it forward, and then we're into the next thing. But the ability to solve issues, particularly in a time like this, is critical. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And I'm gone. There's two thoughts kind of going through my head. Like operating system, you mentioned, whether it's EOS or another operating system,
right.
You might even say all companies have an operating system as well, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's
either by design or by default. Yes, right. They do.
By accident, or it just sort of happened. And that has a lot to do with our ability to line up and get to the root cause and deal with those things. The other thought that came to my mind as you were talking there, Dusty, is this idea of confronting issues, right? That you identify that it's actually necessary to identify we have issues. And this idea of confront, you know, in our Western culture, we've made confrontation carry such a negative connotation as a word, but it literally means to face forward, right? If we can face forward against those issues, man, that's such a difference maker. And if we've got leadership who can say, hey, here's our rocks, here's our issues, let's face forward, let's deal with them, that's going to be the thing that accelerates us through this curve and the next one to come, frankly.
Yeah, that's right. And that's how we'll build the organization long after, you know, there's a vaccine and COVID-19 is hopefully a terrible and distant memory. But it's there, you know, what that just means is there's going to be more issues. And so the strength of an organization to identify what those are at the root and then solve them at the root for the greater good of the organization, that's who's going to emerge from this. And so I tell people, if you're looking down, and I talked about this a little bit, but that long-term vision, if you can't articulate what's in your way from where you are today and what that long-term 3, 5, 10-year vision is, I have a right person, right seat question about you. And, you know, because what we need are people, we may not know what the issues are exactly, but we need people that know there are issues out there and they're sniffing them out and scouting them out. And then hopefully we're building an engine behind us of people that are executing on the business, solving issues and moving things forward. That's what it looks like to come out of this stronger than when you went in.
Well, Dusty, I can't thank you enough. Again, we could go a long time.
Yeah, seriously, we could just keep going.
That time doesn't allow. For anybody that wants to contact you or to learn more about some of the things you're talking about and teaching, where would you direct them or how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, a few things. The first one is, you know, you can certainly just email me. I love, this is what I do every day. I love it. So my business is called Teaching Traction. So dusty@teachingtraction.com. I have a website too, www.teachingtraction.com. There's some resources out there. I also just refer people to the book Traction, or there's kind of a Traction library. And again, that's what I teach through this. But, you know, Chuck, you've mentioned some good supplemental other materials as well, that, you know, whether it's the motive or there's any number of articles now just about this. But that's how you can get in touch with me. I would love to just have a conversation about what EOS is and what I've been seeing. And, you know, this is, I love it. I love the conversation. I love meeting people that are living in business every day. And, you know, just sometimes we need help. And so I love to help how I can.
All right. Well, thanks, Dusty. Thanks for your time, your insight, your reactions to this idea of a curve. And we'll look forward. I'm sure you and I are going to talk real soon. So
yes. Well, hopefully if baseball season gets going, we can start our rivalry up again.
We may need to go help MLB and the ownership and the work on some type of operating system, because right now,
a little remedial intervention there. The world needs baseball right now.
Yes, it does. It needs a lot of things, and baseball is among them.
Yes.
All right, man. Hey, we'll talk soon. Be well, be safe, and thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Chuck. See ya.